Hello and welcome. I'm Amritanshu Rai and you're watching Law of the Land on Raj Sabha TV. Today we bring to you the judgment of the Supreme Court on police reforms. We will do a status check on where we stand on police reforms. To discuss the issue, I have with me Mr. Rajendra Dhar, activist, human rights activist, and Mr. P.S. Bawa, retired IPS officer, former DG of Sikkim, and also presently chairman of the Transparency International. Now for the headlines. State governments reluctant to implement the Supreme Court direction on police reforms. Justice K.T. Thomas Committee report on police reforms reveals that state governments don't want control over police administration to weaken. That is why there is action only on paper. And states opposed to implementing 2-year fixed tenure for important police positions. There's been a consistent increase in the complaints against police officials relating to torture, extortion and rape during police custody. But the government is yet to evolve a foolproof system of objective policing. The state governments are yet to implement the Supreme Court's direction on police reforms made 5 years back.
The commitment, devotion and accountability of the police have to be only to rule of law. The supervision and control has to be such that it ensures that the police serve the people without any regard whatsoever to the status and position of any person while investigating a crime or taking preventive measures. This was the principle laid down by the Supreme Court in its judgment. The court had directed the state and central governments to ensure that the police functioned without the interference of high and mighty. The Supreme Court had also asked the governments to act on allegations of serious misconduct by the police personnel,
where people have been detected for property offences. To recover the property, police put pressure, not that they kill them, but extra use of force, sometimes resulting in the death of the people there.
According to the Supreme Court's judgment, 6 notices issued to the state governments and 1 directive to the central government to reform the functioning of the police. The state governments are supposed to set up a state security commission as a watchdog body to oversee the functioning of the police, and all that it recommends will be binding on the state governments. The Director General of the Police of a state has to be selected from a panel prepared by Union Public Service Commission, and including him, the Inspector General of Police, the Deputy Inspector General of Police, the Superintendent of the Police and Station House officers will have fixed tenures of 2 years. The court had directed that the investigation duty has to be separated from law and order duty, and each state has to create police establishment boards to deal with transfers, postings and other services related matters for the police officers. That states are required to set up police complaints authorities at state and district levels. To look complaints against police officers, central government has to constitute a National Security Commission at the union level to prepare panels for the selection of the chiefs of the central police organizations.
You cannot aim at reforming one agency in an environment where many agencies come together to deliver the results. So simply aiming at police but all other agencies not being reformed also makes the reformation process ineffective.
The Supreme Court had passed the direction in 2006 on a petition filed by a former Director General of Border Security Force, Prakash Singh. The petition brought out the misuse and abuse of police force. The judgment was delivered after 10 years of hearing. Raj Kamal, Raj Sabha TV.
Sir, has anything changed after the judgment? So the first question to you, Mr. Bawa. Has anything changed after the 7 directives?
No, I don't think there has been any change in the policing. We had welcomed the judgment of the Supreme Court because it was based on certain basic functions, principles. One was that the Supreme Court wanted the police to be free from the undue outside influence. Do you understand what those influences can be? The other was to bring about professionalism in the organization by saying that investigation should be separated from the law and order duties. The third principle which they looked into was that there should be fixity of tenure so that there are no uncertainties in the minds of the officers who will go weak because of the threat of transfers. And lastly, probably they had in mind that
Any of
the-
these implemented yet? 5 years, sir.
and the posting should be on merit, and that's why.
Yes.
No, none of these. Only a few states have come out in compliance with the Supreme Court decision. Most of the states are reluctant to cede powers to the various institutions which have been prescribed by the.
I'll bring in
Honorable
Mr.
Supreme
Dhar.
Court.
Why do you think the police is reluctant to implement these?
You see, the basic problem is, the mindset. You see, police is a force. If we go back, maybe 20 years, 40 years, 50 years back, they have always thought we are the law by it, So nobody can challenge us, and nobody should challenge us. Nobody wants to give up the power that they have usurped, as a matter of fact.
No, I understand the police point you're giving. I'm saying the order has to be, the directives have to be implemented by the governments.
Yeah.
So the police may be acting in a certain fashion, but eventually it is responsible to the elected government of that day. What is the reluctance at the level of the governments to implement these directives?
The government is not inanimate. They're people, basically, and they also don't want that power should go out of their hands, and that power remains in their hand when the executive is within their control or is subservient to them. You see, and the executive, they have their weaknesses. You see, and those weaknesses are fulfilled by the bosses.
Right.
Those who have to implement. And it's vice versa. Now, you see, a police officer is asked to do something which is not correct. If he doesn't do it,
He's punished for it.
he is punished for it.
Right.
And punishment could be of any nature. It depends on the boss. You see? And so nobody wants to stake his job. Number one, no police officer, no government employee, as a matter of fact. We are talking about the
I'll
pledge.
bring in Mr. Bawa and his experience into it. What is the punishment? The indirect punishment of not listening to the boss of that day.
The only punishment which the political executive is able to inflict on the reluctant officer to do their bidding is transfer. One, and transfer from an important job to an unimportant one, or transfer from place A to place B. And this transfer, bug is what is making the police officer's mind very weak.
Is it still prevalent?
It is. It is. It is still prevalent. And I think if you can take the fear out of transfer, you can really do wonders. You can do justice, you can do policing on proper grounds. I had my personal experience in 3 states of the country where I was threatened on transfer, and I said, sir, you have the authority to transfer me out, and none of them could transfer me. I had my full innings in all those 3 states as chief of police. So therefore, this is the fear of the officer concerned rather than a compulsion from anybody else.
I'll get you in, Mr. Dhar. See, one aspect is government reluctant to implement. Second is a professional police system or organization we need to construct. He's brought out a point that transfers is the biggest threat that is there and which the executive uses. But as a professional organization, the police, have you found anything wrong in the system of police which can be corrected, because the police still has a lot of power?
You see, what I think about it is that no system by itself is wrong or tainted. It is tainted by the people who are part of the system, who are running that system, maybe at the top, maybe at the bottom. You see? Now, there are certain directions issued. Now, Supreme Court, for example, regarding FIR, they have issued certain directions. Right? Now, those directions are that if a person doesn't register an FIR, whether he's the IO or the SHO is responsible for it, yet still SHOs are not registering FIRs. They're reluctant to register FIRs. And it has been clearly stated, directed by the Supreme Court, that the police commissioner, for example, has to take immediate action against that SHO if the complaint comes to him.
But that will never happen.
No, I'll
right?
tell you what happens in that. I'll
Yeah.
just tell you. You send a complaint to the commissioner. That commissioner will, the commissioner will send it to joint commissioner, so on and so forth, and finally it will land up with the same IO for report, for inquiry and report.
So no
now,
action will-
how will he go against himself only?
So there's
He'll
a
never do
conflict
that.
of interest there. It's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will tell you about Justice Thomas Committee report on police reform. The report found that states are reluctant to implement the order of the Supreme Court. Welcome back. Most of the state governments are reluctant to implement the order of the Supreme Court as it would weaken the grip of the state on the police administration. This was the finding of the Justice Katie Thomas report. The Supreme Court had appointed Justice Katie Thomas Committee to find out whether the state governments have implemented their orders.
Former judge of the Supreme Court, Justice Katie Thomas, was disappointed over the state government's indifference to police reforms. Members of the Thomas Committee visited states of Karnataka, Maharashtra, West Bengal and Uttar Pradesh to check the ground realities. The findings from these states did not reflect any change.
I think the Supreme Court should in fact hold up all these states for contempt. And this is something that we've been pressing the Supreme Court to do.
No state government in this country wants to lose their authority over the appointment and transfer of police officials. This was the observation made by Thomas Committee, which was appointed by Supreme Court. It is also found that the police complaint authority at state level, which primary duty is to monitor the misconduct of police, is also dysfunctional. According to the report filed by the Justice Thomas Committee, all states had notified the establishment of a State Security Commission (SSC), but with considerable dilution. The selection of DGP has not seen any changes since the UPSC falls outside the powers of the state government. On the question of fixed tenure for top officials of the police force, all these states were out of line with the Supreme Court's directions. No concrete steps for separating investigations from law and order activity has been taken by any state. Police Establishment Board (PEB) to provide for the transfer and posting of police officers have been set up, but lack of effectiveness. The State Police Complaint Authority (SPCA) is yet to be set up by most of the states, and most states have expressed inability to set up district-level authorities.
There should be police complaints authorities, which policemen are also not agreeing, but I am in favor of it, that whether complaints against the police should be quickly looked into. And political masters, they should also try to see that unnecessary pressure is not brought upon the police.
Justice Thomas Committee observed that the several state governments were reluctant to implement the fixed tenure because of administrative reasons. The states also ruled out the establishment of separate district-level police complaints authorities, as it was not feasible for the states to set up authorities in every district. The Thomas Committee submitted its report in August 2010. Raj Kamal, Rajya Sabha TV.
Most of the directives of the Supreme Court are yet to be implemented. Mr. Bawa, implementation. Is there a problem of resources with the state to implement all the 7 directives of the Supreme Court? Is that a valid problem, first? And second, almost all 7 directives, the states have sent the ball back to the Supreme Court, saying the Supreme Court needs to further elaborate on each directive.
I think, except for one directive of the Supreme Court that investigation should be separated from law and order, this requires the resources, means that you will require more of manpower, more policemen, more training, and correspondingly more prosecutors, etc., etc. That's the only recommendation of the 7 recommendations which is dependent for its success on the resource element. All the other 6 do not involve any expenditure at all. For instance, Police Establishment Board, it is an in-house organization. Complaints authority will consist of the officials who are already functioning, say session judge, DGP or somebody else, etc. And State Security Commission can be set up. You know, there are so many commissions which are looking into various aspects. So I see no problem of resources except for separation of law and order from crime investigation. The others are all doable with very minimal cost because all the things are existing. The only problem with the states probably is that they don't want independent institutions to reign the individual power of the political executive.
Right.
That is, and the Supreme Court judgment is very clear. I see no reason why the state should go back to the Supreme Court to spell out further. This is absolute common sense, and all the directions can be implemented straight away, and for more of manpower and training, they can start the process by calculating the number of police officers who would be required.
I'll bring in you, Mr. Dhar. Do you think by implementing these 7 directives, there'll be a difference in the police organization? And you as a human rights activist, the way you're dealing with them now, you think they will be much more objective and independent and much more professional?
No, certainly not. You see, because it is something, my father used to do this, therefore I am doing this. You see, and the grandson will say, my father used to do, my grandfather used to do, and so I am also doing. So you have to change the mindset of the people first, right? Now, you see, everybody has a different, style of talking. Now, all policemen, basically, when you see them talking somewhere, their style is very clear. We are the lords. Nobody can speak against us. And if he does, then he's in for trouble. Now, as he says, transfers. It's not a question of transfers only. It's every police officer, or for that matter, every government servant, this is our finding, wants a wet seat. You see? And to retain that wet seat, he would do anything in the world. That's the unfortunate reality.
Mr. Bhava.
Yeah, he's very right. That's a weakness of the individual.
Right.
And weakness of the organization which gets into this trap. So that's why I said most of the police reforms are doable within the organization itself. And there are no constraints. There ought to be no constraints if the intentions are clear, if the top leadership is bold enough to say, we shall have this, put things in the process, request the government by referring to the Supreme Court decision that these are the directives, they have to be complied with, so therefore we want these institutions to be set up.
I get it. You said it was an individual problem. It was the mindset he is talking of. According to him, the police organization, the mindset will not change even if you implement this. Now the point is, do you think the number of individuals in the police organization with the kind of mindset he is talking is increasing by the day?
See, mindset is you can't change the mindset of people unless and until something is imposed from outside. It's very good if I change myself, but if I'm not changing myself, then somebody else has to discipline me. So therefore, if we assume the mindset to be what it is and that it will continue, there will never be any change.
So you suggest the institutional framework once it's changed?
Institutional framework which will go on reining the mindset and disciplining it, negotiating it to proper ends.
Right. It's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will show you an interview with former Director General of BSF, Prakash Singh. It was on Mr. Singh's petition that Supreme Court passed. Welcome back. My colleague Raj Kamal Rao spoke to petitioner in the police reforms case, Mr. Prakash Singh, and began by asking him about the importance of fixed tenure.
The frequency of transfer should be less. I mean, officers should be allowed to stay in a station for at least 1 or 2 years. In UP, there are instances where officers are transferred in 24 hours, within 3 days, within 1 week, within 1 month. But this should not be there because it means dislocation and disturbance for the officer and his family.
So some states complain that as police is a state matter, some states complain there is a lack of funding in the maintenance and arrangements of the police camps. Do you agree with the fact that?
So funding is a different matter. I mean, in fact, the government has been releasing a lot of money under modernization of police forces. But the actual position is that several states are not able to utilize those funds properly, and the funds have to be surrendered.
Final question, political influence, it's a practical problem. How to avoid that?
See, political influence, unless you have an institutional mechanism where a police officer can function without this feeling of fear or favor, that yes, if I perform my duty, I will not be punished. That environment has to be created.
Who has to
And,
give that
and,
assurance?
and that environment will be created only when you have a proper institutional mechanism in place.
It has been nearly 15 years that Prakash Singh has been fighting for police reforms. Now he is contemplating a moving of contempt petition in the Supreme Court. Sir, the first question to you, Mr. Bawa. You said State Security Commission and police establishment, which is a recommendatory body.
Yes.
What is the point that you would like to make about that?
See, the State Security Commission would be responsible to ensure that the DGP and the senior officers who are posted on those crucial assignments are people of merit. You know, there would be three, it would be a panel of 3 senior officers in the line, and the State Security Commission will say, okay, here is a suitable person. This would ensure the merit of the head of the police organization. Number 2, this would also ensure the fixity of the tenure, that every DGP or the head of the state police must spend 2 years on that post, so that he is not uncertain about being posted out on the whims of somebody. So this would be the task of the State Security Commission, and it's a very important task to bring about a confidence in the minds of the police officers that they will not be transferred, or they will not be hounded out, or they would not be wronged if they are not complying with the undue orders or instructions. They can't give orders, instructions, quiet, tacit instructions of the establishment, of the political establishment, of the political executive.
Right.
So it's a very important board which must be
And
set.
I would like to bring Mr. Dhar in. Complaints Authority.
You see, I have been advocating for the last 2 years directly at a direct level with all police officers, the Home Ministry and the Law Ministry, etc., for setting up of these complaints authorities. You see, and my first, contention is that no police officer should be part of it.
Okay.
Because fraternal reasons are the reasons where police officers, they do any excess, they do any wrong, they are absolved. And it's a common practice. You see? And as far as wet postings are concerned, as I told earlier, you see, it is, it's a malignant, I would call it a disease, which is prevalent everywhere. And it is not very easy for us to, remove this or rectify this problem.
Cancer.
Yeah, but what I say is, as he says, Mr. Bawa said, changing the mindset. As I said, changing the mindset. It can be done. I have been advocating that with all senior police officers and the Home Ministry also, and they have taken Home Ministry has taken certain steps in that direction for, a psychological initiative to change the mindset of the people, and it can be done.
Right. Complaints Authority, do you agree with him when he says that Complaints Authority should not include any police officer, because there is a fraternal affinity. Obviously you would not like to punish someone who's directly under you, even though he has wronged too many times. The first attempt would be to protect him.
See, we have to have some trust in the officers of the institutions. To exclude police officer from the complaint authority may not be that desirable, because the constraints of functioning would be known by the police officers, senior police officers. But if there is only one police officer in the complaints authority, and if the head of the complaints authority is a sessions judge, and if there is there's a member from the civil society organization, a few others, then the undue influence of the police officer would get neutralized, minimized.
Yeah.
So I think in order to appreciate the constraints of the police functioning, it is necessary to trust the organization. After all, the law has trusted with so many powers with the police, starting from the arrest to search, seizures, use of force, etc. So it's a matter of trust. If we completely distrust the organization and its officers, I think that may not do good to the authority.
On the note of trusting police officers, thank you, sir, for joining us on this discussion. It's time for us to end the show. You can email your suggestion and comments to law.rstv@gmail.com. You can also watch our shows on the YouTube. We'll be back with a new issue and a new episode. Keep watching Rajya Sabha TV.